everybody, and welcome to our broadcast, Heart of the Matter. I'm so glad to be here with you, and I'm so happy today to have my guest, Darlene Anita Scott. I met Darlene at the Mayo Clinic when we were both training to become Women Heart Champions, and I immediately fell in love with her, thinking that she was a kid, 25 years old, and I've learned that she's 40-something. So anyway, I'm going to introduce her, and then I'll be asking her some questions. So welcome, everyone. Darlene was born and raised in Delaware with a twin sister, 3 older sisters, and her mom and dad. She now lives in Virginia, and she spent most of her adult life as an English professor. Currently, she's a writer and visual artist, and her hobbies are running, cycling, and experimenting in the kitchen. Welcome, Darlene.
Hi, thank you.
I want to start off and ask you if you would tell us your heart story, what was going on with you, your symptoms, what was the situation, and the diagnosis and the solution. If you'd tell us your story, I'd love to hear it.
Sure. I was diagnosed in 2016, so almost 5 years ago. As you heard, one of my hobbies is running, and that's how I noticed that something was different. Really, that's the only place that I noticed that something was different. So I was training for a marathon, um, and I noticed my conditioning wasn't improving. And so I addressed it with my doctor, and at my annual visit, we did a pulmonary exam. The pulmonary exam, of course, uh, so scheduled me to do a chest x-ray, and it was on the chest x-ray that we saw that my heart was enlarged. That same day, I ended up going in for an echocardiogram because the pulmonologist was concerned about what we saw on the chest x-ray. And it was there that I was diagnosed with heart failure. First diagnosed with heart failure because that's the first thing they saw. On that same day, I took an EKG, and we also saw some electrical problems with my heart outside of its pumping ability, which is what we're talking about typically when we're talking about heart failure. And so I began medication on that day. But then the concern was why was an active woman who was otherwise healthy and had no um, featuring characteristics for heart failure, why was this happening? Um, that was a process. Spent a lot of time doing a lot of testing and figuring that out, and that turned out to be autoimmune disease. The autoimmune disease having affected my heart and caused structural damage. And so I got a pacemaker and an ICD for the rhythm problems. And I continue to take medicine for the pumping problem, the heart failure aspect of it. That's a quick version.
Um, I, oh my goodness, that's a lot to happen to a runner, a healthy person. And were you surprised at their diagnosis?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's not, in fact, in my initial appointment with my primary care, she thought that it was perhaps my lifestyle. So I was busy at work, in addition to taking on the chairmanship of the department. I was studying to be a personal trainer. I was teaching fitness classes. So I was doing a lot in my life. And she just thought that perhaps I was doing too much, essentially. But at the same time, she said, because the only time that I really had severe symptoms was when I was running, we thought perhaps it was exercise-induced asthma because it came about also in the spring. So we were like, well, maybe some sort of allergic reaction that's causing her to have asthma when she exercises. I didn't have
Right.
the breathlessness when I would walk up steps and things like that that are typical presentations. So so yeah, it was quite a shock. And I thought I was a healthy person. So
Yeah. So did you have any emotions with that diagnosis initially?
I think my initial I realize now that my initial response was denial. I thought I could health my way out of it, so I thought it was temporary. Like, so when they told me, when the cardiologist, diagnosing cardiologist told me, um, that I was in heart failure and what he saw, and he spent some time explaining everything. I said, "Okay." So as I continue running, I said, "I know I can't run this marathon, but perhaps I can." Um, I said, "When you should I just reduce my mileage?" And he was like, yeah." And I said, "So when we say reduce, how much are we talking?" Like, should I run 5 miles? Should I run 3 miles? And he said, "I don't want you to run at all." I said, "Okay." So I said, "What about this medication this prescription you're giving me? When should I begin taking it?" He said, "Tonight." Because I thought, "Oh, this is kind of like." I explained it to someone. I said, "I thought it was like a Z-Pack. I would take it for 10 to 30 days, and I would kick out whatever this was, and I would just be fine." But, so yeah, the initial response was denial. Then there was, fear and sadness. The fear lingered, I think. Um, yeah, and to this day, I guess I kind of go through, as you might relate to, you kind of go through cycles to there's also grief because of the loss of the life that I was living before it's kind of like before diagnosis and after diagnosis. And sometimes I do find myself mourning the before diagnosis life that I had.
That grieving process will get you. I totally understand that. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So, did you make some lifestyle changes after you got that diagnosis?
The lifestyle changes were related to my activity, because so many of the things that one would be told to do to prevent heart disease, I was already doing. You're supposed to move, I was moving. You should eat a heart healthy diet. I was vegan and I ate whole foods, like I don't eat processed foods.
Mm,
Um, and so yeah, so those kinds of things that we talk about diet and exercise, I was already doing. And those are the typical lifestyle changes we expect one to do. So my activity changes were just to do less, which at first was really hard. The medicines have made it easier simply because they don't allow me to do the same things.
right.
Like particularly like the beta blockers and that sort of thing. So I would say my lifestyle changes have been in just reducing my activity and then um, taking more time to rest. Because I know that I did not do. I did not rest a lot. The
Mm.
maximum I think I would sleep was like 5 hours maybe. That was a solid night. And my doctor would always get on me about that.
Yes, rest is important.
Yeah,
So, what are you doing now? What are you doing for fun?
for fun. What am I doing? I mean, I still run. I've taken up cycling. Um, and that's been interesting. So always kind of chasing something new. I tried yoga. I did yoga before, and I liked it okay, but running was always my first love. And so I tried to incorporate more yoga, partly for that to rest my mind because when we talk about that grieving process, that's part of it. That your mind is always thinking about what could be, what could have been, and that sort of thing. Um,
Right.
I can't say that the yoga that I've taken to it in the way that I've taken to running. So I wouldn't say I do it for fun, but it was just one of those it has been one of those things where I kind of chase new goals and those goals sometimes have to be outside of what my goals used to be. But the chasing of
Right.
new goals is always really, really exciting, really fun.
And what about your poetry?
Oh, yeah. So yes, I write poetry in 2019. So I was diagnosed in 2016. In 2019, or 2018, I should say, was the process. I began the process of co-editing an anthology, and that anthology was published in 2019. And so the pandemic kind of came about, and slowed up our book tour. So we've been doing a lot of virtual stuff with
Mm,
that. And then I have another collection that'll be coming out in 2021 from University Press of Kentucky. And I'm excited about that because I was working on that even before on that project, even before diagnosis. So it's
right.
nice to see that come out. Yeah.
That's exciting. I put your website underneath so that you can so people can see your poetry if they want to.
Sure. Yeah.
So tell us what you learned about yourself when you heard the after the diagnosis. What did you learn about you?
What did I learn about myself? I think I knew that I was stubborn or determined. I say determined. Some people say stubborn. Um, but I but it showed up even more after diagnosis, I think, or particularly in response to diagnosis. And my determination is or stubbornness, depending on who you speak to, is has everything to do with me thriving through the diagnosis and not just kind of surviving it. And and so, that the way that that looks in diagnosis is that kind of like I was describing, maintaining my activity level as much as
Mm,
possible has been part of that. With my cardiologist, and now I have a whole team, so electrophysiologists and so forth. They're all really aware of my goals with activity, and so we work to make sure that I can meet as many of those goals as is safe. Um, and so they've seen that in action. And I spent a great deal of time in the first year or so with the pacemaker, going in and taking new stress tests and doing different things to try to adjust the level so that I could meet my activity level and also stay safe.
yeah, good for
Yeah, that
you.
kind of noticed.
So my last question today
Mhm.
is, what advice would you give women about heart disease?
Um, I think based on my situation, I would say don't think it can't be you. I certainly was probably one of those not me people. Like this would
Mm,
never happen to me. Um, and so, you want to take good care of yourself, but yeah, don't think that it can't happen to you. And then if you're a woman who is actually living with heart disease, I think it's really important um, to stay motivated as much as possible. And figure like I say, I chase goals. I just try to find something new to do. So when I wasn't able to run while I was waiting on the pacemaker, or they were waiting to decide whether to give me one, I pursued my artwork a lot more than like I just dove into that to kind of give myself an outlet because I wasn't spending 3 hours on Sundays running, but I could spend those same hours doing something
um,
um, to keep myself motivated and to keep again chasing for something different, something new, something exciting.
that's great advice, and I thank you
Yeah,
so much.
thank
Darlene,
you.
thank you for being with me today, and I'm
Thanks for having
excited that you were here on Heart of the Matter broadcast, sharing your heart story and all your
me.
wisdom from these past 5 years of being a survivor and a thriver, and I thank you
Yeah,
again. All
thanks
right.
for having
Uh, we'll sign off for now, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye, Darlene.
me.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Bye.